that we have the marvellous Mark Pitman from Garlic Theatre here with us today. So please join me in welcoming Mark. So what I'd really love to start with, Mark, is by kind of getting your life in puppetry, a sort of brief life in puppetry, kind of how you started in that art form, whether you came from a sort of puppetry background or you got into it later, and sort of roughly how you got to
where I am
where
today.
you are today. Exactly.
I left school at 16 and I wanted to be a model maker. And so I joined a little model making firm because I wanted to do like sci-fi models and film work and spaceships and things like that. So I joined this model making firm, and it was, we did ships and oil rigs and architectural models and fiberglass and all that sort of thing. And I was with them for about 4 years. But in that time, I was also doing amateur theatre. So I was doing set building and sound and lights, not really going on stage or anything. The model making firm went bust, and I ended up working with a residential place teaching special needs adults. So I did that for about 4 years. At the same time I was doing the theatre work, I got interested in mime. And this is like the early 80s. So I really got into mime. The youth theatre group that I was working with had a term on mime, and I loved mime. I thought it was fantastic. And at the end of the term, we went and saw a mime artist called Nola Ray, who's very well known, you've most probably heard of. And I thought she was fantastic. And the arts centre that I went and saw her, my local arts centre, was going to do a 12-week mime course. And it was classical mime, corporeal mime. It said, instead of just picking up a cup, it was this sort of thing, and very classical and thing. And I was very tall and skinny, and I was very good at it. It just came naturally. And I just fell in love with mime. And we met some friends, and we started to do as much mime as we could, and studying with different people. But in the early 80s, there wasn't really anywhere to go. So I was trying to toss up, I'm going to have to go to Paris. Do I go to De Creux, Marcel Marceau, or Lecoq? And Lecoq came in to give his lecture demonstration. I thought, oh, that's where I want to go. And also, I've got a big passion for masks. So I love mask work. And so because most of his course is based on masks as well, I went to Lecoq for a year and came back, worked with special needs for about another year until I sorted out what I wanted to do, and ended up thought of puppetry seemed the next best thing because it involved making things, sets, working with kids, working with adults, working all sorts of things. So I got a job at Norwich Puppet Theatre, and it was the days when they had school touring. There was a lot of school touring. So you would have a 2 or 3 week rehearsal with, this is when Ray Da-Silva was running the Puppet Theatre, and so we'd have a 2 week, 3 week rehearsal period, and then 2 of us would go out and do school touring. So it was like 2 weeks in Cambridge, 4 weeks in Bedfordshire, 2 shows a day, 2 schools a day, 2 shows in the morning if it's a big school, take it down, another school in the afternoon, 5 days a week, 3 months, constantly touring. So it's like when you learn a musical instrument, you're just doing it every single day, every single day. And that's sort of where I got my grounding with puppetry. And then Ray Da-Silva decided he was going to leave. I was very fortunate to be at the Puppet Theatre at the time when they had a swap over of artistic directors. So then Barry Smith came in, and he's another famous puppeteer, but he was more of an adult puppeteer. So we got to work with him. And when I worked with him, his way of directing with the breath and everything, suddenly all my stuff I did at Lecoq with the neutral mask and everything, it all slotted into place. It all fell into place. So my love of puppetry is coming from movement and mime side of things. So that's sort of how I got into puppetry.
I wondered if you could speak a bit about that relationship between mime and puppetry, because I think there are some really interesting parallels, but I guess they're not immediately obvious.
For me, if you want to be a good puppeteer, you have to do mask work and you have to do movement work. And when I was teaching at the Central School of Speech and Drama, I used to do a lot of work with mime and mask work and movement with the puppeteers that I was teaching. Because if you've got an understanding of how your body works and breath, then it's very easy to transfer that into puppets. Really, really easy to transfer that into puppets. So I constantly use the mime skills and the mask work and the neutral mask work that I did with the puppets. It's just, for me, it's just a real natural link. It's there, and it's all about breath for me as well.
Breath in puppetry, but also in
puppetry, in the movement, and just those little subtle things. Like I think I'm quite technique based. I remember learning something in a mime class about the 8 movements of the head, which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And once you start to learn those 8 movements of the head, and you link it to breath, it's really, you can make the puppet think of what it's thinking when it's looking at the audience. And it's just learning sort of simple movements as well. So it all fell into place like that.
Real. So how does that kind of translate into the stuff that you're doing at the moment? So you've brought Eggs on Legs, which is a brilliant children's show that some of you may have seen. This great surreal children's show. So there might be something you'd like to say about that, but also I think specifically the Bag That Went Boo is something that maybe utilises those mime and clown skills quite a bit.
When we formed Garlic Theatre about 1997, when it was with me and my wife, and she'd been to India for 6 months, and she was coming back, and I said, oh, let's work together. And we applied for the Arts Council funding, and it was when the Arts Council funding was just coming out, and we got money to do George and the Dragon, and so we built George and the Dragon for 2 of us, and it was very much a fun clowning sort of show, and that was our style is very much clowning, puppetry, physical theatre and masks. And then as sort of kids come along, it became one-person shows. So what happens is it might be Ikloosh's turn to do a show. So she has the idea, and it's her show, and we build a show for her. Following year, it'll be my show. It'll be my turn to show. She's got more of a acting background and music background, so her shows have a tendency to be with live voice and music. My shows, I prefer mime and physical theatre and mask. So my shows have a tendency to be with those sort of things. She quite likes things like the classic fairy tales with 3 Little Pigtails, or Goldilocks and the 3 Bears has been very successful. And I quite like the other things because of my Lecoq background. I like thinking, oh, I'm going to do a show about eggs, or I'm going to do a show about shoes, or I'm going to do a show about bags. So we get together and we improvise things around those titles.
So it's very kind of object-driven for you.
It's an idea and we improvise around it. The way that we work all our shows is whoever has the idea, whoever's turn it is to do a show, we come together, we have a nice little team of 4 of us. So it's me, Iklooshar, Steve Tiplady is our main director, and Liz Walker, who's a very good puppeteer, but she's got the same wacky sense of humour as us. And we spend 3 days just playing with bits of cardboard, having lots of fun. Maybe we've made a couple of puppets and we'll play around and see what works. Generally we rehearse at the Puppet Theatre as well in Norwich, so there's lots of puppets that we can just pick up and try and play and see what works. And by the end of those 3 days, we've got a vague idea of where we're going and what we're doing. But that's it. And we've got a list of what we need to make. So then we'll go away, we'll do lots of making, and we've got a vague idea of what the set is like. And then 2 or 3 months later, we'll come back and we'll do another 3 days of playing with the things that we've got. And by the end of that 3 days, we'll have a vague storyline of beginning, middle, and end. And we'll have a long making list. and then we'll go away and we'll spend another 3 or 4 months making things, and then we'll have a 3-week rehearsal period, where we'll just rehearse for 3 weeks, and then it's ready to go out. And Iklooshar is a musician, so I do a lot of the set and the puppets. She does all the music, and then she'll do a lot of puppet making as well. She's very good at sewing and things like this. So I'll do the mechanisms and the mechanical things. So we've got a nice balance between us of what we want to do.
And it sounds like that process has been honed over, 2 weeks doing play and then refining.
It works really well. We know what we want to do. Yeah. Also, we've been doing it for so long, we know our audience. So we know what works and what doesn't work. But then again, sometimes some things work. So we did, like for Eggs on Legs, I made one puppet of the tall one with the very tall one with the long legs. I made that one, and after the first 3 days, it didn't work. We went down the wrong road. And we looked at the videos that we made and thought, this doesn't work, it's not what we want to do. So we went away, I made some more puppets, and we had another 3 days. And then suddenly it fell into place that time. So it doesn't always work, but most of the time we know how it works. Yeah. And it's very easy, and we do a lot of coffee, and we do a lot of cake, and there's a lot of play, and there's a lot of fun. So we all get up and play, we all get up and do it, but we'll have this fun thing. That was the worst idea of the day. That was the best, and I'll say to Liz, you get up, you do it, and I'll copy your best bits and see what you do, and I'll do it. And so we'll laugh and we'll have fun. So there's a lot of play in it and a lot of fun in it, what we do. Yeah, Steve, because we're a couple, there's always, we said very early on, if we don't have a main director, then we'll bicker. And so the main director has the overall say of what works. If there's a disagreement, that works and that doesn't work, but we'll go with that. So that's sort of how it works.
I'm really keen to open it up to some questions. So if you do have some questions for Mark, please do catch my eye. But I also have plenty of other questions that I could ask as well. But I remember.
I was thinking maybe if you could say something about like how you like come across puppet voices and things like that. Because there's a lot of like strange, jittery. I don't have a theatre background, but I am like a puppet maker.
Oh, right.
And I have an art background, so all the performance side of it is like really interesting to me. Really unusual to me.
As I said, my shows generally don't have a lot of words in it. Although I have done shows, so The Sorcerer's Apprentice, which I did years ago, that was very much a scripted one. This one has got certain voices and things, but I tend to see, with the shows that I did with Lewis Boy at the Puppet Theatre, they were odd characters and things. So when I do voices, they're quite nasally, or there's an old king, or they're dotty characters, which I just generally have fun with. And I don't really have the voice training either. I have done voice training and I've done some, but I never fall into it naturally. I find it's for me it's hard work trying to get the voices. I also don't hear things particularly well when it's when somebody says do a voice, do it like this, I don't hear it. So I struggle with that sort of side of things. Whereas my wife, Iklooshar, it's natural for her. It just comes really easily for her. And if we did quite a lot of touring abroad with George and the Dragon, and we would do it in English, but we would always use certain phrases would be in that language. So every time we said dragon, we would say it in their language, or there'd be certain key phrases she would do it just like that. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't do it, and it would be all over the place, and I couldn't remember it, and I couldn't say it. So I find voices really hard.
How did that go? Using just the single words in another language for the audience, was it enough? Or?
It was enough. It was when we did George and the Dragon, all we had to do was just say the word dragon, and it was just the way the puppets reacted and the way that we reacted and things, and the audience just picked it up. And it was such a simple thing visually, the audience knew what was happening. So we had no problems with that whatsoever. The bag that went boo it's all mime, and the only thing that says in that is the little red bag goes boo. But it works really well. It naturally, it just seems to work really, really well. That's what I'm happiest with. That's what I like.
You're happiest with the simplicity.
It's the simplicity of things. I think I like the shows that have a really simple idea, that I can explore the movement and the puppetry element in it, whereas you don't have to rely on the words. And I like something to rely on what I'm saying or my clowning, or when I walk out on stage, I can look at the audience and I can play with the audience, and I can stand there and do nothing and just be a clown and see how long I can stand there before I get a laugh, and then move on to the next bit. I like that body control. I like that mime side of things.
And I guess it speaks to the purity of the art form, is that it is movement based, and if you can achieve something through a movement or lack of movement or a subtle...
Yeah, it's just a very subtle little thing. So like, for example, with the bag that went boo, it's just a story of a little red bag that wants to go home. And that's all it is. But there's the music there as well. So when you discover there's a little red bag and he just bends over and he's just sad. It's a little red bag with little eyes on it. And so the audience know, they feel some sort of thing with it. But with the music, there's a bit of sad music, and the little red bag just goes over like that. And it just goes like that. And then you hear all the audience go, ah, he's sad. And you take out a little note, and it's a little piece of paper that says, I'm lost. And you show it to the audience, and they all go, ah. And so you play with it. And you turn it around, and it says, I want to go home. And that's easy. Then it's a journey of how the little red bag wants to go home. So then it's just playing with the audience and little subtle movements of just this little red bag, how it's going to move, how it's going to walk, how I can play with it, my relationship with it as well. So I like the simple thing, the simplicity of things.
And super easy to tour.
Super easy to tour, yeah, yes.
Flight cases.
It's not. I've got a table, and we want to push it abroad, to try and take it abroad a little bit more, possibly next year or something, and just got to remake a table. But it is just like a big box of paper bags, things, and very simple things.
Well, so any more questions for Mark? It would be really great. Yes, at the back there.
I have a question about your character design sort of process. Do you have specific videos of like, I want eggs on legs, right? Do you have that? Do you start having an image in your head, or do you start sort of playing around with things and that emerges as a result of that? And then the other part is like, today at the end of the show, you invited the audience to kind of come and look at the puppets up close. Is this something that you do in general, and what is the appeal for you? Because obviously for the audience it feels really special.
It's always nice that the audience can come forward and have a look at the puppets and ask me any questions. We really like that. It's really nice to get that feedback as well. As for the design of the show, I must admit I'm very heavily influenced by Dr. Seuss. You know, The Cat in the Hat and those sort of books. Not so much the language, but it's the imagination. That's what I like about Dr. Seuss. It's the imagination, and it's that made-up world. So that's what I'm always looking for at the time. For the bag, for eggs on legs, I had to feel, oh, I'm just going to have a go at making an egg and put some legs on it and see what happens. And it was just sort of happened naturally. And then when we had to go away and the first bit didn't work, I thought, oh, I've got to make some more legs, make some more eggs. And I'll make a paper mache egg, and oh, I can make a dog. And that's okay. And then Ma and Pa they've only got one foot, a left foot and a right foot. But that's for a reason, because it's only me doing the puppets. And if I've just got 2 foot and the big wooden feet, and I don't have to worry about balance. and I've got 2 legs and I don't have to worry about the puppet falling over. That was purely the reason why they've only got 1 leg. It's that simple reason. And then I just put a left foot and a right foot, and it seemed to work. But at the same time I was thinking, oh, I need more movement. Maybe I can make the leg go up and down, or I can do this, and I can make it breathe if the leg goes up and down. That was the reason for doing that. The same with the new show that we're building at the moment, which is Snug and Grub Catch a Bug, which is my new show. The puppets are carved wooden heads, but they're like little leather bean bags. So they haven't got legs again, but they hop around like little leather bean bags with sand inside. And again, it's because if it's just one person doing it, I can have fun with the rhythm and the timing, and they work really, really nicely and things. So those are the reasons for doing that sort of thing. And I might do a couple of little drawings, some drawings and some scribbles and things like that, and I'll see what comes out, and I thought, oh, that's quite a nice character, I'll have a go at making that one. Or there's a little fly thing, or a bee that floats around. So that's just what comes out of my imagination, really. Sort of how it works.
And at what stage do you realise it goes from play to, okay, this is a show? Is there you put legs on an egg. Were you clear that there was a show in this at that point?
I think so. It's when we get to that stage of playing, and it's that first bit of playing when we work out, is this going to work or is it not going to work? And so it's play, really. And if we start to laugh and we start to have a lot of fun with it, then we know it's going to work. And because we've been doing it for such a long time, we know what works for our audience as well. So we know what works. So sometimes when our director says, you can do this and you can do that, we go away, no, that's not going to work. We're not going to do that. So it's not going to work. Because sometimes he has an idea where it's too complicated. And we say, no, keep it simple. Things.
That relationship between the creative voices in the room.
Yeah.
So, any more questions? Did you have a question?
I don't know if this is a good question or not. I was just kind of wondering, with the sort of shows that you make and the puppets that you make and everything, do you specifically go out of your way to make things for children, or do you just make what you want to and it happens that it can be enjoyed by everyone?
We have a certain age group that we're aiming at, which sort of our age group is 4 to up to 8 or something like that. But saying that, over the last 6 years, we've noticed that the age has got younger and younger and younger, and it's changed a lot. So that is our age range that we play, and we have our certain theatres that book us all the time, and we go back and they know what they're getting with a Garlic theatre show. Our feel is the sets are always really nice, they look good, the puppets always look really, really nice, and our style of show is comic and funny, but puppetry based. But it'll have other elements like the mime or the theatre or the mask or something like that. But they know what they're going to get with a theatre show. But we always, every show that we do, we always push ourselves to something different. Never try and do the same thing all the time. Every single show is different. So for my shows, it's like Shoe Kangaroo and the Big Bad Boot is totally different from Sorcerer's Apprentice or Eggs on Legs or The Bag That Went Boo. They're always different. So we always try and stretch ourselves.
And that Garlic theatre kind of house style, when did you kind of settle on that, this specific age group and this style of theatre? Did that evolve, or was that something that came from the beginning?
I think it was with our first show, where we did George and the Dragon. Then, and we got funding for it, and we knew we wanted to do a show with the Monty Python style of things, but based around the mummers, kind of traditional mummers, the show with George and the Dragon and with the mummers plays. And because we got, the director was Mark Bell, who was Lecoq trained, and he had that feel of what I wanted to do. And now Mark Bell is quite famous because he's doing the play that went wrong and Peter Pan, or he's doing these big West End shows at the moment. But he worked on our comic timing, which and he worked. A lot of it came with the relationship between me and Iklooshar, of how we play off with each other, and the relationship was, because I was very confident with the movement and the improvisation, I was always up front, ready to do it. She didn't have that side of things, and she didn't know the clowning side of things. So Mark Bell, as a director, started to work on those clowning things. So I would be off doing something all over them, and she would just be standing there just looking at me, thinking, what the hell is he doing? And that's where the relationship and the clowning of our shows began to work.
Yeah.
And things.
Some kind of authentic relationship there.
Yeah. And we just started, and that was where the style of our shows began to develop with the first. But saying that, our second show that we did, which was a bit different, and we wanted to try something different, but we had a director that wouldn't get it down into the right place, whereas Mark Bell said, no, do it this, whereas the second director that we had he wasn't doing that properly. And so then became a very hard one. So then the third show, we went back to Mark Bell, and it went back to that clowning routine that we had between the two of us. So from there, it began to develop the style of show that we had.
I was going to ask actually about that the importance of a puppetry director and what they're giving in that space, because you have experience in doing that in your teaching work as well.
Yeah.
I wondered if you could speak a little bit about how that fits into the whole.
For my shows, when we do my shows, I've got the puppetry background, and I'm quite good at that sort of thing. It comes quite naturally for me, and I've been doing it for a long time. So it's good for me to be told, no, you can't do this, no, you can do that, no, you can't do it. It's more the storyline things. When we do work on Ikloosh's show, Steve is still the main director, but I'm the outside eye for her, looking at the puppetry direction. Whereas, and for her new show that she did, the Nosy Little Troll, there was one particular scene in there where there was a wood troll who was planting a tree, and that was her least favourite part of the show at the time, because it didn't have any words, and it was just purely movement based. But I could see what was funny in it. Now it's one of her favourite parts of the show because there's no words and she can just have fun with the movement things. So I'm looking at as the puppetry manipulation, the movement side of things.
The importance of an external eye to be like, is this translating? Is it not?
Yeah, and also stand still, do nothing. Just make the puppet, let the puppet look, let the audience look at the puppet, let the puppet think, and then it says something. It's funny. You find little things in it. I think.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm aware that we have some of us have a show that we need to get to at Dance City. So if there's no further questions, please join me in thanking Mark Pitman.
Thank you. Thank you.